Welcome to a special edition of Crime Beat, our 100th episode. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, we go back 50 years to a murder that is one of Canada's most notorious.
This was a beautiful young lady. She's only 33, and she was brutally murdered.
A model and mother is bludgeoned to death in her garage with her 3-year-old daughter at home.
It wasn't the body that I saw at the start. It was red blood flowing down the driveway.
There was a lot of blood on the side of the Cadillac on the passenger door, and it indicated to me that a weapon had been used.
With an airtight alibi, why would anyone suspect her husband, millionaire builder Peter Demeter?
He didn't quite react the part. Now that could be due to shock, of course, but it wasn't consistent with a grieving husband, I can tell you that.
Outwardly, Peter and Christine were living this picture postcard life, but inwardly, the house holds secrets that no one could possibly have guessed.
I think the hackles go up in your back when you find out that, geez, we've got appears to be some sort of love triangle.
The wiretapping of Demeter's home was something out of The Sopranos.
There was an unusual cast of characters. The plot was incredible. It had everything. It had money, sex, murder, police shootouts, trips to Hungary, everything you could think of. You felt like you were an extra watching a movie, but it was all real.
Here now is the death of Christine Demeter by persons unknown.
Arundel Village, a bedroom community just 30 minutes from Toronto's downtown core. In the summer of 1973, prestigious homes nestle along the Credit River, decked out with modern luxuries, swimming pools, and automatic garage openers. The latest buzz in this sleepy community is the new University of Toronto campus. And a strange and shocking death in one of its quiet crescents.
This call came in the evening, and we were about to go off duty. I was 33 years old, roughly. I was working with the Criminal Identification Bureau. The home that we were called to was approximately 6 or 7 miles from our office. There was a suspicious death at 1437 Dundas Crescent in Mississauga.
When you get a call at night, you know it's something serious. And when it's the boss, you really know it. And so I got my car, I headed down there. I was a detective with the Mississauga Police Department. I was 31 years old at the time, and it was the start of a career.
Actually, it happened on the 18th of July, which was the day before my birthday. So I said, oh hell, there goes my birthday.
The voice on the phone, the boss, Superintendent William Taggart.
Superintendent Taggart arrives on the scene, and Chris O'Toole is in concert with him. You know, there's something serious has happened, so there's no question about that.
The house is the second last on a quiet, dead-end street.
It wasn't the body that I saw at the start. It was red blood flowing down the driveway. The driveway was probably 3 car lengths long, and it was just brilliant red.
It was a 2-bay garage. The garage door on the left was wide open, and the one on the right was partially open. When we walked in, I couldn't believe it. I mean, there was so much trauma to her head. We couldn't see her face clearly, but I mean, I could actually see some brain matter. We saw what was obviously a female person laying prone on the ground, and she was lying beside an automobile, which was a Cadillac.
When I look at her body, she had a long dress from the bust all the way down to the tip of her toes.
One of her shoes, I believe, was still on her foot, The other shoe had been, was laying beside her.
She was obviously a beautiful woman, in spades.
They discover the woman is the homeowner, 33-year-old model Christine Demeter.
Christine was very much a conventional beauty. A lot of her modeling gigs relied on that, this sort of statuesque, buxom blonde.
She was beautiful. She was very tall, about 5'10", I would say, in her bare feet, and close to 6 foot when she was wearing heels. She had a whole life ahead of her.
This was a beautiful young lady. She's only 33, and she was brutally murdered. And at the same time, her 3-year-old daughter was in her house watching TV, not knowing that her life was totally changing.
Peter Demeter, an up-and-coming building developer, discovered his wife.
On the night of the murder, Peter took a bunch of his house guests into the car, and he was going to pick up what he said was going to be a present for Christine. And when he came back about 9:45, pulled into his driveway, the headlights caught this inert body, and as they got closer, it was her. It was Christine.
13-year-old Silja and 14-year-old Katya were in the back seat of that car. 50 years later, they remember.
It was dark, but there was some light at the house. We drove into the driveway, had this thing where you can open the door of the garage. The garage door opened, and I heard my aunt say, "Oh God, oh God." She got out of the car and made like this and said, "Oh my gosh." She was really, could feel that she was very confused. She was on the ground, completely flat, and there was blood. She was lying in the blood, and her hair was sort of over the blood. My aunt, from the expression of her face, I was pretty sure that she was dead. I thought, when Andrea is alone now, maybe she doesn't have a mom anymore. That was horrible.
Walking up the driveway, I noticed Peter standing off to the side near the body. And I didn't know whether he was the culprit, another victim, or whatever. The first thing he had said to me when I got near the garage door with him was, "Why can't you get her out of here?" And I said, "Well, Peter, we have to, do certain checks and measurements to determine what might have happened to her."
Peter has his own theories.
It was actually his suggestion that she possibly had fallen, that she was looking for something high above the car, and she fell.
The coroner came in and said, "What's your reading?" Everybody asked, "What's your reading?" As if you can figure it all out in 2 minutes. And said, "Well, everybody's of the impression that she fell from there and hit her head on here." He said, "Well, if she did, she had to have bounced 7 times.
The primary goal of a forensic officer is to preserve the scene and record and collect as much physical evidence as possible. It looked like she had a couple of hairs in her hand, and I wasn't sure whether those were hers. There was a severe injury on her left thumb. Whatever weapon was used struck the thumb at that time and resulted in that particular injury. I'm sure there was some kind of a struggle that took place in that garage that night.
Well, I thought it was an accident. I mean, I thought she fell, or I thought immediately, what happened to her? It was an accident. And Silja, my sister, is different from me, but she immediately thought that was murder.
She was beaten to death, and it was a case of overkill, really. And not at all consistent with an accident, which is what Peter Demeter was endeavoring to assert. This was clearly homicide.
Welcome back to Crime Beat. The murder of Christine Demeter made headlines in the 70s. Her story and life with her husband Peter drew so much attention, a movie was made starring actress Elka Summer. But who were the Demeters really? We now return to the death of Christine Demeter by persons unknown.
Would you like Daddy to tell your story?
Yes, please, Daddy.
Okay. Once upon a time.
You have a film being made. The director is Murray Markowitz, and he launches a production called I Miss You Hugs and Kisses.
And they lived a life of total happiness until one day he realized that she was slowly turning to stone.
Which is the B-est of B movies. It was banned in the UK for violence.
Award-winning books are also being written about the strange death of Christine Demeter.
There was a lot of newspaper coverage, and the more I read, the more I saw certain similarities between my life. I was married to a Hungarian. Christine was Austrian, and she was married to a Hungarian. And I had been a model with the same agent that Christine had. And I saw these similarities, and they were very superficial similarities, but they were enough to get me really interested in what was going on.
In Toronto, Christine stares out from newspaper ads and magazines.
Christine is highly ambitious herself, and throughout her life is able to parlay her good looks into becoming a member of the Viennese jet set and eventually becoming the wife of an up-and-coming real estate developer.
Peter Demeter was, in fact, a very good-looking man, handsome. You'd notice him if you walk by on the street. He always wore the best clothes he could. He was movie star good-looking.
Peter Demeter is Hungarian-born, but he's Canadian-made. And in the 60s, he's able to develop this business called Eden's Gardens, which is a real estate development firm.
He literally crawled out of the rubble in Hungary in World War II.
He was born at a very sad time in Hungary's history. He was 12 years old in World War II when Budapest was surrounded and under siege from the Russians, and the Allies were bombing it from overhead. The building in which they lived got hit, and Peter was buried for 1.5 days, I believe, under the rubble. And his father was killed. And later his brother was killed by a stray bullet. After he was rescued, he would have found that his life had, in that one bomb, completely changed. What he learned was that to survive, which all Hungarians who were at that time going through World War II and its consequences, he learned that you had to concentrate everything, whether it was cheating, lying, or stealing, to get food and survive. And that was the world he grew up in.
He caught Christine's eye on a movie set.
Christine and Peter met on the film set of Das große Glück, which is a musical directed by Austrian auteur Franz Antel. There he sees Christine behind the scenes and chases her and eventually gets her, and then they come to Canada together.
When their daughter is born, Peter buys Christine a Mercedes to park beside his Cadillac at their historic home in the suburbs.
We're here at Dundas Crescent, and this is the site of Christine and Peter Demeter's house. When the Demeters bought the house in 1971, they set about creating their dream home. And as you walk through the house, you'd see things like a stone fireplace that was the centerpiece of their living room that was appointed with the newest, most stylish modern furniture. Walking through the house into the backyard, you would arrive at their swimming pool. From the swimming pool, you could look out onto the ravine and the Credit River behind it.
For teenagers visiting from Germany, it's nothing like they have ever seen.
I remember it was a sunny day, and I have this turquoise of the water still in my mind. It was huge. It was gorgeous. I went swimming there every morning with Christina. Before breakfast, she really wanted to swim, and I liked that. We swam together, and we counted 1, 2, 3, 4, and she said she wanted to, I think 25 or so, and I did it too. And that was fun. She was competitive, that's what you say.
Life seemed picture perfect until Christine is found dead beside a blood-splattered Cadillac.
There was a lot of blood on the side of the Cadillac on the passenger door, and it indicated to me that a weapon had been used, and if you can imagine a weapon being raised suddenly, and if it was covered in blood, that it would leave spatters on the side of the door.
Police search, but don't find a weapon.
They don't find any signs of breaking and entering. They don't find signs of sexual assault, and nothing has been taken from the house.
They do, however, discover some unusual things.
The keys to the Cadillac have been placed in the passenger seat of the car. The car's battery has been completely drained, and the garage door opener has been disconnected from the motor. So the garage door wouldn't have opened even if Christine had tried to open it.
We attempted to open it, and it wouldn't open, and it was partially open, I'd say about 2 or 3 feet from the ground.
One of the most unusual things of all on scene is Peter Demeter's behavior.
Well, he's very, I'm not sure what the word is. Is it stoic? I'm not sure. But he's searching with his eyes, and he's taking a look at you.
He didn't quite react the part. Now that could be due to shock, of course, but it wasn't consistent with a grieving husband, I can tell you that.
Peter has a flawless alibi. He was shopping for silver lockets at the time.
We took him back in the middle of the night to the police station. He said, "So what's next, boys?" We're just waiting for the right opening.
Peter voluntarily reveals his marriage is on the rocks.
It had not been a happy marriage for a long time, but that doesn't lead one inextricably to murder. So, you know, you got to be careful about these things. There's a lot of unhappy couples out there who do not kill each other.
Police uncover an accidental death could pay out.
Life insurance, 1.1 million. That was such a big find that we just grabbed onto that right away, and he didn't like the idea that we knew about it.
They had insurance policies of $1 million on each other. So if Peter had died, Christine would have got the money. If Christine died, theoretically Peter would have got the money. And that became very much a part of the case.
As the sun rises, detectives knock on doors.
The neighbor had indicated that they were talking over the fence one day, and she had mentioned to her that she had found some airline tickets, and that wasn't normal. She gave them to me for safekeeping, and that was probably one of the first things that was rock solid.
I do remember searching in the residence. At the time of this incident, I was a detective after emigrating from Scotland, and I was 27 years old. I spent some time there, seized a number of documents that related to the possibility of a love triangle.
Marina Hunt is tall, blonde, beautiful, rich and worldly, very much Peter Demeter's type. Peter had rekindled his relationship with his old flame from Austria.
In fact, she was rather like the doppelganger of Christine, except she didn't need a man to give her the life she wanted.
They constantly write love letters to each other. Christine had actually discovered some of these love letters and was consulting a divorce lawyer.
I think the heckles go up in your back when you find out that, geez, we've got what appears to be some sort of love triangle that may be going on here, and it's relevant to the motive.
Police need to know more, so they order a wiretap.
The wiretapping of Demeter's home was something out of The Sopranos. The police dressed up as repairmen and tapped into Peter's phone line. They did it right away. In those days, you did not need a court order to wiretap.
In July of 1973, there was no electronic surveillance wiretap law in Canada. So it was kind of the Wild West. And you could sort of wiretap anybody.
What he didn't realize was directly across the street from the house he's in is an entire police intelligence operation going in the basement.
Kicked into high gear real quick.
The brutal murder of Christine Demeter on this quiet street is a tragic mystery that intrigues hometown writer Brian Ho.
Outwardly, Peter and Christine were living this picture postcard life, but inwardly, the house holds secrets that no one could possibly have guessed. Christine's murder brought up a lot of immediate questions. Why was she in the garage to begin with? Had she been lured there? Was she meeting someone there? Why had she left Andrea alone in the house?
The biggest question, who would want Christine dead?
I think the first big break for the police came when they got a call from a woman. She was the girlfriend of Peter's best friend, Chaba, and she said that Chaba had been involved in discussions with Peter for a long time of how Peter wanted to kill his wife.
Detectives tracked Chaba to his workplace at a pizza shop in Toronto.
So we get to this place, and just like she said, it's a pizza place. We park the car, we watch for probably half an hour, and said, well, I don't know about you, but I want a pizza. So in we go. And we could see this little fellow back in the back corner.
He tells detectives a story that is stranger than fiction.
Peter was a big movie fan, and Chaba tells police that Peter would plot her death. And some of these plots range from improbable to harebrained. Things like electrocuting Christine in the swimming pool, paying someone to shoot her and then killing the hitman, having her drive over shotgun shells and exploding her car.
An autopsy documents a brutal death.
There was nothing that could have caused her other than severe beating with some type of metal weapon, whether it was a crowbar or a metal bar of some kind.
She was in terror-stricken and fighting for her life, and it was a ghastly, brutal murder. There was no signs of sexual assault whatsoever.
At the funeral, Peter's best friend becomes an informant.
At the funeral home, Chaba has been wired for sound by Mississauga police.
The role of Chaba is really very interesting because he was Peter's best friend. And yet he cooperated with the police to try and get evidence against Peter.
Inside a white van, intelligence officers listen.
So at the funeral home, our truck's sitting across on the other side of the highway and picked up everything very nicely.
Peter's talking to Chaba in Hungarian, and he's thinking he's being very clever because how are the cops ever going to understand what they're saying, right? And what, of course, they did not know was that the head of intelligence for the police was Hungarian. So every word he understood, you know?
És miért akarják, hogy egy ilyen tanúságvizsgálatot csináljak? Mi a francot kéne mondanom?
Csaba, az Isten szerelmére utasít vissza. Ehhez valami vád kellene. Először is fogadjunk egy ügyvédet, egy nagyon jó ügyvédet.
Demeter didn't want him to tell the police what he knew, which was that was the overarching theme there. Don't tell the police what they want to know, which is deadly. Why not? Why would you be talking to a guy like that unless he knew things?
Csaba is trying to get Peter to admit to the murder.
Aki elhagyta a helyszínt, az véres volt, tetőtől talpig. 7-szer ütött a fejbe. Nem tudom, ki lehetett ez. Nem tudom, ki lehetett ez.
De nem tudod, ki tette.
A francban nem tudom, de nagyon primitíven és barbár módon történt.
Because it was being translated from Hungarian, you couldn't really tell what his inflection or body language was. I could say, hell, I don't know. Or I could say, hell, I don't know. It would depend on the roll of the eyes, the body language. What seemed on paper to be definitive proof of his guilt could in fact mean something entirely different.
In those conversations, Peter never outright confesses to Christine's murder, although he implies that he is familiar with the person who murdered her.
The police are listening and watching. They are absolutely mystified. This to them is evidence of guilt.
We would stop in the morning at noon hour and at supper time and knock on the door.
Sometimes dropping information to get the conversation going.
One of the things they told him was that Christine had hired a private investigator to watch him close to the end of their marriage.
And then they listened. And Peter did not disappoint.
Christine egy rövid ideig figyeltetett engem, amíg rá nem jött, hogy itt Torontóban nincs velem.
Igen.
És most már tudom, mikor volt ez, és nem azokban az autósorokban.
Igen.
Teljesen semleges.
És Péter, honnan tudod, hogy nem figyeltetnek téged az utolsó napokban?
Mert kint vagyok, és szabadlábam.
On August 17th, police have heard enough.
A month after Christine's murder, Peter is arrested by Mississauga police for non-capital murder.
When up-and-coming Toronto builder Peter Demeter is arrested for the brutal death of his wife, the press go wild.
And it had all the elements in it: sex, money, a beautiful woman, a mistress. And the press just put their teeth into it and went off into the wild blue yonder.
It has sensational details that you could not even find in the most outrageous crime novel.
But soon, the headlines are taken over with new horrors.
Shortly after the murder, the body of Arundel College student Constance Dickey was found on the campus. The campus lay across the ravine from the Demeter house.
The 19-year-old was about to start her first year on campus. Her body was found hidden in a thicket. She had been raped and strangled.
We had a number of unsolved murders that were occurring in the Mississauga area around that time. Hitchhikers who had been lifted from the road and murdered. And we were really up to our eyes in work.
A high school student named Neda Novak was also found near the Demeter house, a few kilometers north in Streetsville Cemetery.
The 18-year-old had been missing for months. Her body was found in a secluded area. She was sexually assaulted and stabbed.
Mississauga was afraid. Females of that age were afraid. People at University Toronto, Arundel campus, were very afraid.
Someone is preying upon young women in this neighborhood, terrorizing the community.
There's this young girl from England, from Gosport, England, 16 years old, and she'd gone to the X. And she came home She hitchhiked. Ironically, she turned down 2 guys that offered to pick her up because she didn't like the looks of them. So he gets in with this 3rd guy. Then he pulls a knife on her. And he drives behind her into a wood area there. He rapes her and he stabs her. And he puts some stones on her. He sits and waits for a couple of minutes to make sure she's dead. She had the presence of mind to stop moving, and there is a sound of a siren. And it takes off. She gets up and staggers out through the woods. And there's a police car right there because there's been an accident.
She tells police the name of her attacker.
She saw something parking thing on the windscreen, I think it was. They had the name Williams.
We did a photographic lineup in hospital, and she picked out our suspect. The suspect was Henry Robert Williams, who worked at Canada Brick in Streetsville. He was on strike at the time, and Chris O'Toole and I interviewed him, and he admitted to the attempt murder and the murder of the 2 unfortunate girls.
So I was there with my camera, and I'm waiting, and the police station door opens. And I thought for the first time in my life, I'm actually standing 10, 20 feet away from somebody's actually killed somebody, not 1 person, 2 people, and tried to kill a 3rd.
What this reporter doesn't realize is that he'll be seeing this killer again soon. Up the Thames River in London, Ontario, Peter Demeter is set to stand trial in a brand new courthouse. The defense are not happy about the venue.
The trial is a real chess game between prosecution and defense, and one of the big moves happens right at the beginning of the trial. The defense makes the motion to move the trial out of Peel County, away from Brampton Courthouse.
The theory was that because it was so notorious in Mississauga that it had to be moved, and it was infamous and notorious.
The defense wanted to have the trial moved to Toronto. The motion is granted, but it ends up backfiring on them.
In fact, the case ended up in London, Ontario, which was just about the worst place it could have been, worse even than Brampton.
It's curious that the venue was changed to London, the insurance capital of Ontario, when one of the motives for the killing was to reap the benefit of the proceeds of an insurance policy.
The theory was in London, however, that this was a very conservative jury pool with a very good jury pool for the purposes of a prosecution.
London, Ontario, home of family, farming, and one busy hotel where everyone is checking in.
The deal kind of was that I would drive up once a week. Occasionally I could get somebody to let me to stay in their hotel room for free, and I could cover it for 2 days.
In London, the trial has the feel of a daytime soap opera.
The trial of Peter Demeter is certainly the hottest ticket in London. You have long queues lined up each morning so that people can get a glimpse of some of the figures that they've been hearing about on TV or reading about in the paper.
You may get a glimpse of Marina Hunt, Peter's mistress, walking his dog, or Mafia head Johnny Papalia dropping by. John Greenwood and Leo McQuiggan lead the prosecution team.
John Greenwood was an enigma. He was a very powerfully built man. He did some boxing in his time, but to look at him, you want to run. His right-hand man was Leo McQuiggan. He was an expert strategist and tactician, one of the best crown attorneys in the country at that time.
Joe Pomerant and up-and-comer Eddie Greenspan will represent Peter Demeter.
Peter's lawyers were high-flying Toronto legal eagles. They projected this aura of big city players coming into this small town and throwing their weight around.
What they don't know is that they have signed on to what will become the longest criminal case at its time in Canadian history. One that 50 years later is still considered to be one of the most notorious.
Welcome back. Peter Demeter is on trial for the murder of his wife, Christine. While he has an airtight alibi, the Crown prosecution will argue he was the mastermind behind the fatal bludgeoning. We now return to the death of Christine Demeter by persons unknown.
On the 14th floor in a jam-packed courtroom, the prosecution is about to introduce a theory called the isolation of Christine. They'll call to the stand Peter's friend, who was his alibi on that fateful day.
The day of Christine's murder was a busy one in the Demeter household. At the time, they are entertaining a number of house guests.
Dr. Sibylle Brewer and her German nieces are visiting.
I met Peter Demeter in 1963 when I went by boat from Rotterdam to New York. He was tall, dark-haired, handsome, and always attracted to beautiful women. Christina cooked dinner for us. She was a strikingly beautiful woman. She was a good mother. She liked to cook.
It was very alive. Everybody was talking a little bit. Peter suddenly said, and that was very suddenly, he suddenly said, oh, let's do something tonight. And then my aunt sort of said, yeah, what would be your idea? And then he said, well, what about going to a shopping mall? I could show those German girls the shopping mall.
My sister Silja wanted to have moccasins. She had said, oh, I want to buy these moccasins. And at first, Sibylle didn't really want it. She said, oh, it's late and the kids have to go to bed. And I think Peter sort of pushed it a little bit.
When you're 13 and 14, it's adventurous to do something like that in the evening. I mean, they certainly weren't used to anything like that.
Very soon, he had everybody being very excited on that idea. And then it sort of was the question, who is coming along?
Who Peter squeezed in the car is of great interest to the prosecution.
One of the things that points to a plot by Peter to have the house as empty as possible for the murder of Christine is the fact that he demands that the dog, Beelzebub, join them on a trip to the mall.
I had this idea, it's a funny idea taking a dog to the shopping mall, but with all those strange things, I said, well, yeah, that's strange as well, so never mind.
Yorkdale Mall, the dog has to stay in the back seat. Vivica Esso takes the stand to talk about shopping for moccasins and silver lockets.
While at the mall, he establishes what at the time is an airtight alibi. He's in a jewelry store looking for a name day present for Christine, and he calls home.
Vivica testifies that she sees Peter on the phone, but he waves her away and then asks her to take the phone.
Hi. He has Vivica talk to Christine and Andrea back at the house.
8:30 p.m. is the last time Christine is known to be alive. Dr. Brewer tells detectives it was dark when they left the mall.
I do remember us coming back and the garage door opening up. I saw Christina in her brown outfit lying on the ground there and very quickly see that there was a lot of blood. You knew that she was dead. I couldn't tell you how she was killed.
No, nothing.
She was instrumental in really laying out exactly what Peter's actions were on the evening of the murder.
The court hears that Peter could not have committed the murder, but his call may have led Christine to her death.
Why Christine went to the garage, we don't know for sure. The thesis of the police is that she received a phone call from Peter telling her to get something out of the car. And indeed, keys were found on the front seat of the car.
I think what happened was that he made the call to Christine and he probably asked her to check on the Cadillac. Otherwise, what would she be doing in the garage at that time of night? She had a little 3.5-year-old daughter sitting in her living room watching television. Why would a woman go into the garage at that time of night?
And why did Peter wave Vivica away from the phone? Prosecution suggests he didn't want her to hear these directions.
There was blood in the car, so at some point the car door had been opened and somebody was obviously waiting for her there.
One theory, the garage is a trap.
The door didn't work, so it would have been difficult for her to open the garage door. How long it had not been working, we don't know. There was really no way for her to get out of that garage once she got into it.
There was a back door giving access to the backyard, and there were boxes in front of it, and there was also by the front would have been the right tire. There were a number of tires piled up as well.
If she was lured there, there were ways for her to not escape. The theory is that there is a prearranged plan by Peter for hitman to arrive at the house and murder Christine.
The thesis is that perhaps he called the people who were going to murder her and told them that he was away, she was at home alone with her daughter, and now was the time.
The jury hears many theories on how it was arranged, but no direct evidence on who did it.
There was evidence of some hair that was also bagged and again sent to the Center of Forensic Sciences. It didn't result in anything. It was her hair, but obviously it came off. I would think it came off when she was protecting her head with her hand. Yes, there was nothing discovered that was of any significance as far as identifying the perpetrator.
At the courthouse, the investigation is about to dramatically change when a call comes in with the name of the killer.
The police receive a call from another Hungarian who offers the idea that he knows who the murderer is. It's this guy named the Duck.
The town of London is aghast when that informant pulls up with a bag over his head. As the trial moves forward, so does the investigation, sending detectives on the hunt for new suspects. French Foreign Legionnaires, a 6'6" boxer nicknamed the Tractor, a serial rapist who confessed to the murder of young women in the area, and an escaped prisoner who is a self-professed cop killer. The jury will also hear about an earlier plot to kill Christine, one from which she had walked away just a month before her death. That's in part 2 of The Death of Christine Demeter by Persons Unknown. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat. Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast, now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.